Hey, what's going on out there, YouTube family? This is Samuel Legg here representing Team JVS. I'm about to give you guys a review for a Apple TV Plus show that is kid-friendly, but also kind of nostalgic for anybody that was, remembering of the good 90s days of Nickelodeon. And I'm talking about Ghost Rider. So this is a revamped version of Ghost Rider. I'll talk about a brief history about my experience with the original 1991 to 1993 series and kind of how that differences between that and this. But this one stars Isaac Arenas as Ruben, Amadi Chapata as Siobhan, Hannah Livingston as Donna, and Justin Sanchez as Curtis. So the synopsis reads this. When a ghost haunts a neighborhood bookstore and starts releasing fictional characters into the real world, four kids must team up to solve an exciting mystery surrounding the ghost's unfinished business. So, now, to give you guys a small little flashback. The initial Ghost Rider show, it kind of had like this group of friends, and they kind of like noticed this weird little orb that's kind of like floating around, and every time it would float around something, it would get close to a book or something like that, and it would kind of write in details that they would kind of have to go and figure out what is going on. But the only way they could actually communicate with the ghost is they would have to actually write. So they all had like little pens and little notebooks. They would write their own little notes and information to kind of communicate with Ghost Rider, and Ghost Rider always be trying to help them solve mysteries and solve puzzles and figure out certain things about themselves. Now, the difference with this is that in the very first episode, you do get kind of like that little orb kind of floating around. It goes into the bookstore, but then from that point, every single book that's in the bookstore is up for grabs in terms of the way that things are getting positioned for these characters and the way it starts to unravel. The first few episodes revolves around like Alice in Wonderland and how that interconnects with certain characters and the backstory behind Ruben's family and everything about the store, and it fleshes out pretty well. The thing I'll say I like about this show is that they do keep the nostalgic feel of like, these kids trying to find out these mysteries and understand what's going on. There's nothing about this that is very violent or grotesque or anything like that. This is very kid friendly. But there are moments where, kind of like Goosebumps, kind of like a little bit of Are You Afraid of the Dark moments, but they don't go too far. Like there are some, kind of like, I don't know, fear-inducing moments where you kind of like this unknown kind of feeling, like what is really going on, and especially the surrounding mystery, because the very first episode, it kind of surrounds like Ruben. He's going and moving in with his grandfather, with his mother, and his grandmother has just passed away, and like he really doesn't want to be there. He's left his friend behind, and he just has to kind of like associate and assimilate with this new school. And he's only 12 years old. These kids are only 12 years old. And, from that point, all these things start to happen. Like these weird, ghost-like situations start to happen. And I think that the practical effects of this actually work pretty naturally. But the thing I was trying to get to is that it also revolves around, he feels like this ghost, they all feel like this ghost in some way, shape, or form is tied to Ruben and tied to maybe the grandmother and tied to this unsolved, leftover baggage that needs to be unraveled. And through each episode, part of the reason which drives each episode is to try to figure that out, is to try to piece together, is this any way connected to Ruben's family? Is this any way connected to something that happened? Is this ghost, even something that is good or bad? And you question that, because a lot of the times, this is another thing I like about the show, is that these books do come alive. And when the books come alive, you might have like Alice in Wonderland, you might have Frankenstein, you might have like the Jungle Book. I think the Jungle Book episode is really interesting because like they kind of throw you off with certain characters that do come and don't come. And I think also the visual effects, the practical effects, visual effects for this are actually executed pretty well. It doesn't feel like a cheap show. I think that it's not like perfect VFX or perfect CGI, but they use the practical elements of certain things that happen when Ghost Rider is writing or when there's a message coming on. And specifically for me, when any of the characters that come from the books do actually speak or, you know, have conversation, they are very good. Like their acting is actually good. Like their enunciation, their purpose, like it feels like every single character, you know, that's brought from a book, you know, there's an intent there, and it's to get and understand these characters, these kids, and for them to get a revelation about who they need to be right now for each other or for their families. Taking count Curtis and Donna. Curtis and Donna, they're dealing with a situation where their family's going through a divorce, and you know they are handling it pretty well, but they also have their own personal niches that are problems, and people's perception of them changes because Curtis is like the basketball dude. He is like the popular dude, and when he assimilates with this group, all of that starts to go away, as well as certain things about his academia. And he has a really interesting arc as the series goes on. He actually becomes one of the more interesting characters because of his relationship with Ruben, because of what he's really dealing with on a personal level and a psychological level as well. They really do, you know, take time to get the groundwork behind that. And then you got a character like Siobhan. Siobhan is a genius. She is on point, she is studious, she is by the book, by the numbers, but because she is a know-it-all, because she is so immersive and engulfed, she gets, you know, sometimes the group into trouble. She gets herself into trouble. And even when it comes to her relationship with her mom and what's going on with at home, it's very thrilling, it's very, you know, realistic, you know what I'm saying, specifically with her mom's storyline. And then that goes also going back to Ruben. Ruben, again, you know, he's having to go and connect with these kids, but in doing that, he's starting to kind of come into his own. And at the same time, understand who his grandmother was, who his grandfather really is, what the bookstore really means as a whole. And I think that journey, especially towards the last few episodes, gets pretty emotional. There's some really emotional moments. Now, I gotta talk about critiques. There are some cheesy moments. Again, this is very kid friendly. There's not gonna be any like death or blood or curse words or, I mean, there are violent moments, but when the violent moments happen, you're watching these kids, they're trying to just kind of hide and stuff like that, and you see like maybe some physical altercations going on, but you don't really actually see it. And that's not a knock, it's just kind of like, it comes off really cringy sometimes, and really cheesy at times. But again, they never lose sight of the central focus behind the mystery of all this. Even up until the last episode. The last episode honestly might be the last 5 minutes of the last episode and the first beginnings of the first episode, probably the more creepier moments about the series so far, because you get the understanding that you think you know what's going on, but you really have no idea. And I think that's what makes this merited for another season. Whereas, again, when I think back to the old Ghost Rider, one of the things I did love about it is that the kids, it was always a revolving door. It was always them trying to position themselves. Where I think this actually works better is that there is a central focus. There is a interesting detail when it comes to the connection between the books as well as through the actual storyline. So that means it was actually written pretty well to have like these specific books. Some of the books actually, I think from an educational standpoint, this is one other plus I'll give it. Some of these books I haven't even actually heard or read. And I think that that's good, because one of the things about every single time where they're trying to solve something, they have to do the groundwork and read the books themselves. And they have to be able to know the circumstance of the books to be able to get, you know, the characters back. And I think that's where it makes it very interesting, because instead of like, oh, I'm gonna Wikipedia, like, no, they actually have to do their work, and that actually is reinforcement for kids to want to be able to read, to get to know about certain characters. There's specifically a story about, there's a book called Trinity. Never heard of it, never even read it. And I was kind of like, I was sitting there trying to figure it out. I was like, oh man, this is interesting. And I think if you can engage a kid to want to know something more about an interesting book or a perspective, and they find a way of being able to make it cool, it is understandable why this show was Emmy nominated and Emmy won. Now, one thing I will say about the actual director of this and creator, Luke McCath, I'm sorry, Luke Matheny, he directed a short film called God of Love, and he won an Oscar for it. And I think that a lot of the writings and the interwovings of the books mixed with the character arcs and mixed with each person, each character having their own specific arcs, is telling in the writing. I think that he does a really good job of making it so it caters to all, age groups of kids, but at the same time, it's sustainable enough to be like, oh, well, this is insightful, this is encouraging kids to read, want to read, and it's interesting enough, with certain mystery moments and certain scary moments that other people can watch it with their kids, which makes this actually a really good, refined show. I would give this an 8.5 out of 10. I did enjoy the first season, surprisingly. I'm not going to say this is going to replace my head of the original, but I think that it is merited for a watch. Whereas I kind of was a little apprehensive. I think the thing that messed this up for me was when I watched the very first trailer, I was like, this is not my Ghost Rider, and it's not. It's very much so not. It's actually a lot more, because that element of adding and interweaving the actual book characters and making it grounded and understood where things were going to go. If you can get past the first 2 episodes, I think you'll have an interesting ride in seeing where these characters are actually going to go. And matter of fact, actually, I finished watching it. I actually went back through the first 2 episodes because I was like, oh, I needed to understand it. And any kids show that can make you do that, it's done its job. That's my personal opinion. But hopefully you go and check out Ghost Rider. It is on Apple TV Plus, and the second season has been announced. It will be premiering very soon. If you guys would like for us to do coverage on it, please let me know. I think I might just do it anyway. And I have a special surprise coming on Saturday or Friday in tandem, in connection to this specific show. So talk to you guys soon. Keep it locked. JVS. We ain't gonna stop. Have a blessing, guys. Peace.